The following presentation was recorded at the 2012 SouthEast LinuxFest in Charlotte, North Carolina. It is licensed under a Creative Commons license. For more information about the SouthEast LinuxFest, visit www.southeastlinuxfest.org. The SouthEast LinuxFest would like to thank the following diamond sponsors in 2012 for helping make these videos possible.
Okay, hi everybody, welcome to SouthEast LinuxFest. One of the things I want to let you know about, there are survey forms at the registration desk. So please pick one up and fill it out. Your survey form will become a raffle ticket. This evening there's going to be a raffle after the keynote. You can win prizes. The same thing is going to happen tomorrow. Tomorrow there'll be other survey forms. And there's another raffle Sunday after lunch, so you can win lots of good stuff. So that done, David Nalley is going to talk with us. And he has his own introduction slide, so we're good.
Hi, folks. A couple of housekeeping matters. First of all, you just heard about the survey. I will tell you my pet peeve, so if you have problems filling out the survey, you can enter my pet peeve as things that Self should improve on. Power cords at the tables in the talks so that people can still run their laptops all day long. That is my one suggestion for what Self can do better. Also, this is the pre-lunch talk, so I know that the longer that I keep you, the longer I'm keeping you away from food. And while I firmly believe Tonstoffel, Fedora is giving away essentially a free lunch. It's across the street at Marshall Park, which is across McDowell Street from the hotel. And they have literally hundreds of hot dogs to give away. And they're celebrating their Fedora 17 release, which is called Beefy Miracle. So real quickly, who am I? I'm a committer for Apache Cloud Stack. I'm a contributor to the Fedora project. I'm a recovering sysadmin, and so operations side of things is where my true heart lies, even though I'm working more and more on the developer side of things these days. I'm also a maker of very ugly slides. You will see no pretty colors, and you will see nothing that is aesthetically pleasing. And I generally don't like slides to begin with, so I try and use them as sparingly as possible. So, just to give you a brief history of open source. Open source certainly did not start with Linux. But Linux is a good case study because Linux came about as someone trying to recreate something proprietary. And we have similar examples through the history of open source, and you look at things like OpenOffice.org or LibreOffice. They began as effectively trying to combat the inroads that Microsoft Office and some of the other groupware and office productivity suites had made, and trying to provide a free alternative. So if you look at Linus's original message, he said, this is going to be a hobby. I'm trying to use something like Minix because essentially I can't run Minix at home. And that was his goal. His goal was to replace Minix initially. That grew up a little bit, right? So Linux grew up and started competing against Solaris, and it began competing against HPUX, AIX, and a number of the other proprietary Unices. Of course, to do that, Linux had to begin maturing a lot faster, and a lot of companies jumped in around that. And if you look at some of the big players today, you see folks like Intel who makes chips. You see folks like IBM who don't inherently sell their own Linux distribution. And then, of course, you see folks like Red Hat and SUSE and a little bit from folks like Canonical. And they're trying to build Linux, and many of them are building businesses on or around Linux. So another good example is the Apache Web Server. Essentially, this was developed in a parallel time frame to some of the other early web server. So Netscape had a proprietary server at the time, and of course Microsoft had IIS in the 1994-1995 timeframe. Of course, the fact that it was free and also the fact that you could have vhosts made HTTPD the dominant platform for web services. But at the time, and HTTPD came from NCSA, so there was one, and essentially the three dominant platforms in the mid-90s were Netscape, IIS, and a distant third was Apache. So the default is still not going to be free and open source in the mid-90s. Over time, we've seen, as we've seen with Linux, we've seen that open source web servers have become dominant. The number one server is Apache's web server. Number two is Nginx or Nginx, and IIS is the third, a distant third. So this leads me to this premise. Historically, open source has been trying to reinvent the wheel, and while they've been innovative in a number of things, they've tried to compete with proprietary software. And effectively trying to ensure that there is a free alternative for whatever that is. So we had Linux providing a free alternative to commercial Unices. We have web servers, we have office suites, we have entire desktop platforms that essentially are trying to provide an alternative to those non-free software. So somewhere in time, folks, and largely these are companies, began needing commodity hyperscale infrastructures. The most obvious examples that will jump to mind from mid-2000s on is Google and Facebook. When they talk about their infrastructures, they are talking about the number of physical servers beginning at the high 5 figures and growing into 6 figures very easily, and potentially far more. I don't think we've seen a recent server count out of Google. Honestly, proprietary software was not even a consideration simply because of cost. And even though things like Facebook and Google started out very small, the things that the folks who were building it were familiar with were Linux, free software, open source software. And so that was a natural home. The fact that it had zero cost for them made that an obvious choice. And starting, around this time frame, people who are building these greenfield businesses are building it all on open source. It became the de facto standard. And you can say, yeah, that's just, you're talking about big web scale companies, and there are a lot of big web scale companies, but I thought we were talking about clouds. And so just bear with me a bit. Cloud's a heavily abused buzzword, and I'm sorry for it. I find myself in an ironic position. I want to say 3 years ago at Self, when I was actually on the Self board, I told people that I would reject any cloud talk ever proposed. Shortly thereafter, and I mean less than a year, I started working for a company and I acquired a cloud.com email address, and I now am a committer on a cloud project. So everybody wants cloud. A few people are starting to understand what cloud really is. So I want to delve down into what cloud is for just a moment. So if you want a great technical read that will put you to sleep on the plane back, the NIST has a great definition of what cloud is. It's very broad, but it's also far more narrow than what you see cloud being tossed around on. And it's worth the read if you're at all interested in the cloud space. But Dave Nilsson has this definition that cloud is awesome, and effectively that's on-demand, self-service, scalable, and measurable. And those 4 key characteristics you will find in any cloud environment. And if things do not have all 4 of those, they are not cloud. And that's a good bright line rule, generally speaking. So back to our friends at Facebook and Google. They are effectively software as a service cloud platforms. You're bringing your data to them, and you're pushing your data and consuming others' data, but that is effectively all that you have. And at the same time, it's still on demand, self-service. You can create accounts at Gmail, and you can create accounts at Facebook just by signing up. And so they're on-demand self-service. They are measuring account. They certainly will provide you with some of those measurements. They'll tell you how much mail you're consuming out of Gmail and a number of other things. And of course, it's scalable. They continue to scale up my Gmail storage. They continue to scale up the capacity to handle more photos, more users, etc. The interesting thing here is that unlike some of the traditional enterprises, there was no consideration of anything else other than Linux and open source tools to build that. And I don't think we would see some of the interesting players like Google or Facebook without open source. So now we get to the real cloudy part. Even though Google and Facebook are effectively running their own internal private clouds that are software as a service platforms, Amazon comes along. A researcher in South Africa who worked at Amazon writes this paper and says, we can sell excess capacity. We can make money doing this. We should go ahead and do this. And EC2 comes out. I want to say that was 2005. Their virtualization platform is Xen. And that's, of course, running atop Linux. All of their initial offerings until several years in were all Linux. They were using para-virtualization, so there was no option to really run anything other than a Linux or a BSD. There's some stats that people are publishing that says Linux has more than 70% of the instances on AWS right now. I think those stats are skewed, and here's the reason. You can publish your own AMI, and you can publish a number of other, publish that disk image up to Amazon, and Amazon is not inherently going to know exactly what it is. So you can push that up, and that makes the statistics really hard to choose from. So 70% of the instances running on Amazon are an official known to Amazon as a Linux AMI.
Is that running or available?
Running. That's not available AMIs, that's running instances.
How do they get that?
So supposedly Amazon provided that stat to some analysts about a year ago. So that is, I'm not making up numbers here, even though statistics are useless. So both the underlying platform and the platform of choice there is open source. And I would not be surprised if the 70% were in reality closer to 90%. So let's talk about how successful AWS is. There are a number of customers. There are at least more than 2 customers who spend more than 9 figures a year on AWS. So hundreds of millions of dollars from multiple customers, and those are the top end. So think about what that means that they're pushing revenue-wise. 25%, 2 years ago, 25% of all web traffic was going through AWS. So a lot of that's driven by places like Netflix, who are obviously streaming vast quantities and do everything at Amazon. But 25% of all the web traffic, period, that traverses the net 2 years ago was running through EC2. That's a tremendous number. Everyone else wants to cash in or at least stop all of their customers from leaving. And so two of the big, the next largest public cloud providers are Rackspace and GoGrid. And they did exactly what Amazon did. They built atop Linux and Zen, and they started offering cloud services. As a matter of fact, there's only one of the top 5 infrastructure as a service public cloud providers that doesn't use Linux and Zen as their base platform. So essentially everything except the platform-specific glue that they're doing things like billing and provisioning with, all of that in 4 out of the 5 top public clouds is built on open source. So then we start having cloud software come out, and this really started about 4 years ago. Eucalyptus was the father there. They, our grandfather, they started in 2008, early 2008, and started working on infrastructure as a service software, and they released it under the GPL. CloudStack, which is the project I work on, the company that initially worked on it started working on it in 2008, about 6 months after Eucalyptus started. And they were largely building in private, but as soon as they got to the first release in 2010, they open sourced that under the GPL as well. OpenNebula, who's another 2008 starter, is another open source platform. And then OpenStack came along. OpenStack really came about because people were very frustrated with Eucalyptus. They would have equally been frustrated with CloudStack had CloudStack been the platform that NASA was using at the time, because while the code was open sourced, the development process around it was not very open and not very transparent, and was very difficult for people to participate in. So OpenStack was born out of that frustration, and then also around the same time, Abaquo. These are the big infrastructure as a service platforms that are out there that have come out since 2008. Every single one of them is open source. I can think of maybe 3 or 4 proprietary platforms, and I would venture to guess that every one of these beats the market penetration for that platform aside from VMware. VMware has vCloud Director, which I think simply because of VMware's install base is a little larger. So here's the state of things, and this is what the premise of my talk is that we are seeing an example in cloud computing where open source is the default. People start with open source. They're not playing catch up. True innovation is happening here, and people are not even considering, by and large, deploying proprietary systems. It's not without its problems. When Linux came out, and if you look at some of the things like the Revolution OS movie or documentary, that Revolution OS documentary has ESR telling some guy, recounting a tale of telling a guy from Microsoft that he was his worst nightmare. And there was a very antagonistic relationship with and around Microsoft and other proprietary companies. That antagonism has not gone away. We're starting to see now that the only players are open source. People are often catching themselves being overly negative towards other open source projects, and that should not be the case. In open source, because of the nature of code sharing and experience sharing, when one person succeeds, everyone's boat floats a little higher, even if not directly benefiting. So co-opetition is a lot better than competition, and so be on the watch out, particularly if you're participating in these communities for the competition against another project. I don't think that that's necessarily good for the open source ecosystem or for the projects themselves. Negative energy is a bad thing. We're also seeing some proprietary companies. IBM's no surprise there in that list, right? Because they've been around in open source for a long time, even though everything they do is not open source. They are a big player in the open source world. But if I were to tell you Microsoft, Microsoft is doing a ton of things around open source. I heard that there was actually a Microsoft representative who came to SELF wanting to talk about all of the open source goodness that you could run atop Azure. If you saw some of their recent presentations, they're showing off running Hadoop on Azure, running WordPress, running a number of other open source applications, even running Linux in an infrastructure as a service mode atop their platform as a service platform. The real surprise here is VMware, because VMware has not been a big player in open source, and one would argue that open source is actually antithetical to their future profits. They sell their main product is a proprietary hypervisor, and yet they were the first company to release any type of platform as a service as open source. They released Cloud Foundry as an open source project. Now, one can argue about how open, obviously the code is open source, but how open their processes are. The fact that they did this in the first place and effectively let the next generation VMware cash cow be open source is very telling. People have essentially said that there is no future in doing something as large as cloud computing in a proprietary manner, and that openness is required, and not just open APIs, which 10 years ago would have been a shock to have open APIs out of a lot of vendors. But we've seen that drive towards openness not just affect open source software, but push open APIs. So now I'm going to ramble a bit. I'm going to leave my my contact information up here. I think that there's a compelling argument to be made that we're seeing a shift, and even if you ignore the cloud space, I see new software companies coming out frequently, and their products are invariably at least open source or open core, if not completely open source. And so I think we're seeing a tidal wave shift in the technology culture towards a more open nature, where people are expecting and demanding that things be open, if not open source. And I think you'll begin to see that open source is the default choice. We've certainly seen that outside the US. There are a number of countries that have mandates that you should prefer open source or open source first, open standards second, and proprietary is a last-ditch, proprietary closed is a last-ditch solution to any problem that you're trying to solve. And we've seen that in a number of countries in Europe and Latin America already. So I think that the tide is shifting, and honestly, while open source doesn't necessarily have all of the money, I think that is dramatically moving away from being the underdog, and that in many ways we have at least the mind share to push forward and to make open source the dominant method of getting things done. And so I know this is a small crowd, so feel free to talk interactively, ask questions, harass me, disagree with me, argue. Silence. Outstanding. No one disagrees with me? Anyone from VMware or Microsoft here? Okay. Have I said anything that made anyone mad? Maybe that's the problem. I should have said something that made people mad. Well,
There's still time. If you could repeat my question. Is anybody using KVM? Is any KVM making it?
so Jimmy wants to know if anyone's using KVM. Are you talking about public cloud providers? So in public cloud providers, there are, Rackspace has a cloud in beta that is running KVM. It is not yet production. Contigix immediately jumps to mind. They offer a KVM they have multiple hypervisors available in their cloud, and one of them is KVM. There's a number of others that are much smaller. Essentially, the problem there is that back in 2008, Amazon had proven that they were making money with EC2, and when these people started building out cloud platforms, Xen was far more viable than KVM at the time. So typically, the folks that are doing KVM, it's a later addition, and they've already got tremendous amounts of infrastructure built up with Xen. I will apologize up front for what my employer has done to the Xen community. I work for Citrix, and we have, at best, neglected the Xen community. There are folks who realize that that's a problem now, and hopefully that's going to be remedied, but Xen was, not that Xen was necessarily ever terribly mindful of its user or developer community, but Citrix certainly hasn't made it any better. Yes?
More on the Xen KVM thing. Now, can you tell us any major gaps between KVM or Xen, or any reasons why you would use one over the other?
Yeah, so Xen does a little better performance with Paravert than KVM does with VirtIO. And that's, especially as you scale to thousands of machines and you're having tens or hundreds of thousands of customer VMs, that becomes a big consideration, because even though it may be a few percent per VM, it doesn't take long for that to add up. Honestly, I find Xen more finicky as to what it will run in Paravert mode than KVM does with VirtIO. But I think that's that for a public cloud provider who makes things work and has service offerings out there that says you can deploy Fedora or you can deploy Ubuntu, they're going through the steps to make sure that works and deal with the finickiness. So KVM's probably easier on a small scale. Xen lends itself to being very customizable, and while KVM, there's essentially two real deployments of KVM as far as a software offering. There's Red Hat, which has it running on RHEL and Rev, and the open source side of that is Overt. There's also Joyent, who's running KVM atop an Illumos kernel, Solaris kernel. With Xen, everybody and their brother has ported it. It runs on ARM. It runs on, I think there are folks who are running it on MIPS stuff, old MIPS stuff. Oracle has ported it, and so if you want to use Oracle databases, you have to use Oracle's version of Xen. And the other side is there is a ton of experience around Xen. If you look at the install space that even Red Hat has for their Xen stuff in RHEL 5, that install space, the number of DOM zeros is well into the high 7 figures. So I think it's the expertise already gained there, and people tend to like. There is a subset of the world that tends to like how segregated it is from the underlying operating system as well. But I'm sure a Xen guy, and I'm very much not a Xen guy, I can use it, but I don't even advocate for it. I really do like KVM personally, and it's my personal belief, not my company's belief. At the same time, everybody I talk to who's running this at large scale thinks that there's probably a year or 18-month feature separation right now between Xen and KVM for large scale deployments. So. All right, so if there are no other questions, and if there are, yes, sir. I think that in the open source space, and this is another area that I'll say I think there's far too much competition instead of co-opetition between Zen and KVM. I think KVM already has the mindshare battle won. I think Zen still has the install base and the very large deployments. And so will KVM catch up? I think that folks like Red Hat and IBM are certainly working to ensure that that happens. What's the timeline on it? I don't know. I think they have largely already won the mindshare battle there, and just haven't finished the rest of that up. So. All right. Well, it is noon. That means you've got 30 or so minutes before lunch starts, and you're welcome to. Don't forget that Fedora, right across the street, is giving away free hot dogs. Thank you very much.
Cloud stacks are everywhere.
This is the way to better utilize all your resources, and it makes managing all your resources pretty easy.
All of the innovation is happening in open source.
The collaborative nature and of the community and the speed at which these deficiencies, these bugs are getting discovered and fixed is a thing that really shows the power of the open source community.
It is global, and it's definitely because of the users.
Community people are extremely friendly and always ready to help.
If you go onto IRC any day, you'll see these guys helping each other out, and they're all doing it like in a selfless manner.
The product is transparent for everyone. Everyone can look at the code base. Everyone can see how Cloud Stack is being built. Nothing is proprietary. Everything is open.
In many ways, it's absolutely vital to the ongoing health of Cloud Stack.
The most exciting event in recent memory for me was our first developer boot camp. And our call gave people, I think, maybe 2 weeks notice to come attend. I was expecting 25 or 30 people. So we ended up with 87 people and had to go get more chairs into the room twice.
Everything within cloud computing is commodity and is open source. And so I don't think that you'll see anywhere where open source is not pervasive in cloud computing. And so I think it's an assumption. I think when you talk about cloud computing, you're really talking about open source cloud computing.
CloudStack is a robust solution for large deployments.
You have dozens of data centers and thousands of servers in each data center. These hardware is going to fail, and CloudStack is designed to handle, number one, that mass scale. Number two, it's designed to handle the failure that inevitably happens in large deployments.
We started working on CloudStack over 4 years ago, and it was the original set of people working on it had a background of delivering software to telcos and service providers.
Lots of QA, lots of users actually using it.
High availability is the key feature. Multiple hypervisor support, different network models. You can pick up whatever suits you better.
Cloud Stack Management Server can be deployed in different physical machines.
It definitely has a huge footprint. It's being deployed everywhere.
There's a major movie studio that they were using CloudStack. They were using it to transcode video, and I thought that was terribly fascinating. What I found more fascinating is what they did during lunch, where they would spin up 50 or 60 game servers, and then as soon as lunch was over, they would destroy all the instances and go back to doing real work.
CloudStack is vast. It touches so many different aspects, and there's no one person that's kind of like a master of all those realms.
I think CloudStack as a project is going to be one of the leaders, simply because it's some of the most featureful and robust platforms out there.
I don't see any limits to the cloud stack.
When we created Asterisk over a decade ago, we could not have imagined that Asterisk would not only become the most widely adopted open source communication software on the planet, but that it would impact the entire industry in the way that it has. Today, Asterisk has found its way into more than 170 countries and virtually every Fortune 1000 company.
The success of Asterisk has enabled a transition of power from the hands of the traditional proprietary phone vendors into the hands of the users and administrators of phone systems. Using this power, our customers have created all sorts of business-changing applications, from small office phone systems to mission-critical call centers to international carrier networks. In fact, there's even an entire country whose communications infrastructure runs on Asterisk.
Digium has always been about creating technology that expands communications capabilities in ways that we could never have imagined. And that's part of what's game-changing about Digium. Today, we're doing it again, this time by introducing a new family of HDIP phones that extends control of the user all the way to the desktop.
The launch of these new products represents the next phase in Digium's history of innovation. These are the first and only IP phones designed to fully leverage the power of Asterisk. When we first discussed our expectations for building a family of phones for use with Asterisk, our requirements were pretty simple. We asked the team to build the phones such that they were easy to install, integrate, provision, and use. I think you'll soon agree our engineers have delivered on that goal. User feedback is validating that when it comes to operation with Asterisk-based systems, including our own SwitchVox-based product, these are the easiest to use, best integrated, most interoperable products on the market today. The Digium family of phones will initially include 3 IP desk phones, uniquely designed to complement any Asterisk or SwitchVox-based solution. These phones are different for a number of reasons. First, they're exclusively designed for use with Asterisk. Secondly, we've made it really easy to auto-discover and provision the phones. Next, we've made it easy for the phones to access information inside of Asterisk, allowing tight coupling between an application and the phone. Additionally, we've created an applications engine that allows users and developers to create and run their own apps on the phone. And finally, we've done all of this at a very compelling price point. At Digium, we're always thinking of ways to give our customers the best value in business phone systems, and also give them the power to create their own solutions for any communications challenge.
We'll continue to push the boundaries, not only to make Asterisk cooler, faster, and more technologically feature-rich, but to make Asterisk and VoIP communications even easier.
And together, we'll change the way the world communicates.
Again.